Hi, everybody. Welcome here today. We're so thrilled to have you. For me, it's nice to meet some of you finally, who I've been speaking with on Zoom for the past little while, so it's nice to be in three-dimension. My name is Wendy Skolnick. I'm Associate Vice President Philanthropy for Eastern and Western Canada. I'm actually based in the Montreal office, but thrilled to be out west for the end of this week. Thank you for being here for Mission Imperative. This week, the Mission Imperative tour began in Montreal on Monday. We were in Toronto on Tuesday. We were in Vancouver yesterday, and we're finishing here in Calgary with what is sure to be an incredible event. Each city addressed a different focus, and our focus here today is going to range from everything from wheat to cattle and pipeline and everything in between, and it will all make sense. In the last 200 years, the human population has grown exponentially, from over 1 billion to more than 8 billion today, resulting in climate issues that can seem daunting. Today, we will discuss how science, industry, and each of us can be part of the solution. For those of you unfamiliar with Weizmann, the Institute has an over 70-year history at the forefront of scientific discovery. Since 1964, Weizmann Canada has been helping to support these critical discoveries. And I know that there are a lot of new people here today, and so we're thrilled to introduce Weizmann to you. And if you have any questions at any point, there are a few of us in the room that are more than happy to speak with you. Part of Weizmann's reputation is built by challenging current thinking with curiosity-driven research, which has led to life-changing breakthroughs. The Weizmann Institute of Science began its sustainability efforts back in the 1980s, led by visionary donors from Canada with the launch of solar research on campus. This vital work in sustainability continues today through efforts to make our campus more sustainable and with the launch of the Institute for Environmental Sustainability, a commitment to taking immediate action on turning the tide of climate change and making the next 10 years count. Recently, Weizmann ranked 8th in the world for research quality in the prestigious Leiden University ranking among the likes of Harvard, Princeton, and MIT, and the only institute outside the US to rank on the top 8th. One thing the current pandemic has taught us is that science is the key to a better tomorrow for all of humanity. Weizmann research transcends borders and reaches us in Canada every day. Last year alone, Weizmann co-published studies with more than 30 Canadian institutions on topics ranging from the environment to therapeutic discoveries. Encouraging dialogue and collaboration to promote new discoveries is what Weizmann is all about, which is why we're so very pleased to welcome you here today. Before we begin, I'd like to sincerely thank our event sponsors, who without their vital support, today would not be possible. Wealth Stewards, Nutrien, who's here with us today, Jaroslawski Fraser, who also is here with us, Raymond James and Rempart Asset Management, the Stephen Schiller family, RBC Foundation on behalf of Marita Simbol is on Wealth Management Group, and Andrea Yampolsky of AY Talent. In a moment, Don Farrell, Chancellor of Mount Royal University and Trans Mountain Corp, President and CEO, will come up here to join us as moderator for today's panel discussion. Rather than read Don's bio to you, which we'd be here for probably most of the morning, we simply asked her to provide top three achievements as they relate to the panel discussion today. Here's what she said. She was ahead of the curve in sustainability by endeavoring to bring together environment, economy, and society. In 1988, Don was the policy advisor for the CEO of TransAlta when he was chair of the Alberta Roundtable on the environment and the economy. This led to many other notable firsts, including recommending market-based approaches for pricing the use of the environment, writing the vision for sustainability for Alberta, including a sense of place as a key value for people, having the first money in Canada to purchase greenhouse gas offsets and purchasing those offsets, as well as writing the energy chapter in the book Changing Course. Worked with the team at TransAlta to transform the company to a commercial culture where sustainability was foundational to the company's strategy. and created an environment at TransAlta where men and women work together side by side to lead the company. Bravo, Don. Okay, well, let's get started. To begin, please direct your attention to the screen for this short video introduction.
I love this place. Believe it or not, only 120,000 years ago, the Dead Sea level was even lower than what it is today. We study what happened back then to predict what will happen due to global warming.
Today's state-of-the-art solar technology only works well in specific locations, like here, in the desert. Our future lies in designing intelligent materials that capture sunlight anytime, anywhere.
Clouds are one of the most important components of the climate system. They control the amount of energy that reaches the surface. So the question is, how will climate change affect them?
Our lab is studying microbes in their natural habitats to see how we can work with them to alleviate human impact on the environment.
By understanding when and where plants flower, we can greatly improve present-day crops and also introduce new ones that would better cope with a rapidly changing environment.
Did you know that it takes about 2,700 liters of water to dye one single cotton t-shirt? We are developing cotton in different colors, which would save a huge amounts of water and would create green new sustainable materials, or red, or blue, or yellow.
Israel is a country with abundant sunshine. We are researching intelligent materials that are not only better at harnessing this energy, but can even self-heal.
Plants and forests absorb huge amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. In our research, we're asking, how can we enhance their ability to slow down global warming?
Every second breath we take is created by algal blooms in the ocean. It's therefore vital to understand how this ecosystem functions.
Corn, rice, soybean, and this wheat are the 4 major crops that feed humanity. Improving their yield and nutritional value in a sustainable manner will benefit all of us.
Understanding how microorganisms influence our oceans now and in the past will give us insight into what will happen under climate change. This is critical information for ocean stewardship.
Wow. Thanks, Wendy, and thanks for that great introduction to Weizmann Institute. I know a lot of people in the room here are familiar with Weizmann, and then other people aren't. And I think the cross-country tour that you're doing is a tip of the iceberg of the kind of work we need to be doing to bring the work that Weizmann's doing into the work that everyday people are doing. I'm really pleased to be here to bring this panel to you. We have a scientist and a rancher. And it really doesn't get much better than that if you're me, because I grew up in Calgary, but my father was a hunter and outdoorsman, a beekeeper, and we grew up, my father hunted with a bow and arrows, so everything that we ate was sustainably procured. We used everything that we ate, and food and gardening and all of that was a big part of who we were. And there's nothing more disappointing to me than today to see that food has become something that's not all that nourishing for a lot of people. And I was saying to Avi, we have people that are still calorie deficit and hungry on the planet. And we have now this emerging obesity where people are nutritionally in nutritional deficit and are on their way to diabetes. I think the latest number is 50%. So I think we have a food crisis. I'm not sure that it's a food shortage, it's a food crisis, and bringing together the best of science and the best of what ranchers and farmers can do so that we as mothers and grandmothers and fathers can feed ourselves and our families is, I think, one of the most important issues that we have on the planet. So a couple of housekeeping points. We are going to record this session. We're going to start with 5-minute discussions with each of the panelists, and I'll introduce them shortly. We will open up the floor at 8:45. You better have your questions ready because I'm super curious, and if you don't grab a mic, I'm just going to keep on going. So, and I'm sure you'll have tons of questions here because already I have 10 more from just our Zoom call, after our Zoom calls. We'll finish right at 9 though, so that everybody can get back to work. So I'm going to first start with Professor Avi Levy, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Biochemistry, Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences, and the co-leader of the Institute for Environmental Sustainability at the Weizmann Institute of Science. He has talked about his 3 accomplishments. You can, if you go into his research, it won't be a half a day to figure out his CV, it'll be a couple of days. So what he says, and I think this is terrific, that he always feels that his next accomplishment is the one that will be the most important. I love that.
I hope.
I love that. That is that whole idea of continuing to learn and to grow.
And not to rest on your laurels.
And not to rest on your laurels. He's proud of the students that have become researchers and who are leaders in academia. And he's known for dissecting the molecular mechanisms that contribute to the evolution and plasticity of plant genomes. So we are going to have a test on that at the end of this. And Dr. Levy, you're going to tell us what that all means. So over to you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. It's great to be here, and especially this venue is fantastic. This morning we came a bit early, but it's okay. I'm jet lagged, so no worry. And I had a chance to walk through the garden. I mean, and there you get impressed by what we call biodiversity. All the forms of life which happen, which exist on the planet. You can see this picture taken from the spring in Israel, just near our campus. So why is it important to conserve biodiversity, and why is it related very strongly to food security? That's one of the things that I want to discuss today. And I've been fascinating trying to understand the mechanism. That's what the tough sentence in the end, that's what I'm really doing, the nuts and bolts of evolution, how evolution works, how mutations are formed, and how the DNA is repaired, and how, if the DNA is repaired precisely, there is no mutation. So only if there is errors in the repair, you get a mutation. So what determines what kind of errors, what kind of mutations we get, and so on. And this is what created all these biodiversities that we have. And if you think about it, that plants are with us for 100 millions of years, higher plants. And before that was algae and ferns and mosses, and then we have plant taxonomists here. So they've seen lots of climate change. They can adapt. They have a huge plasticity. The genome of plant is very diverse. You have small genome, huge genome. One of my favorite organisms is wheat, and wheat has a very complex genome, about 3 times more genes than we have human. And the reason for that is, it's harder to be a plant than a human. We eat plants, so we get everything from the plants. They have to do the job to create all the goodies, all the proteins, all the sugars, all the vitamins that we are eating. We make very small amount of compound, about 4,000. Plants do hundreds of thousands of chemical compounds. So it's really a fascinating world. And there is a lot to learn from that for new medicines, for food, for nutrition, and so on. So these are the kind of things that we investigate. And we've been inspired by nature to develop new technology to modify plant genomes. So once you understand how mutations occur, there is a new generation now of mutations that are being developed, and we're doing that in the plants to make very precise changes. So this is the way that you can adapt plants to new environments. And maybe I give you a few examples. We work on wild wheats. So wheat, as you know it, and Canada is blessed by growing lots of wheat. It's one of the food baskets of the world. But if you think about it, when did wheat come to Canada? It's, with the first pilgrim, it was grown, it didn't barely grew. Only with genetic selection, mutation after mutation, it managed to be adapted to the climate here. And it's complex, very complex, and it's an amazing achievement, I think, of the Canadian breeders. But it all started in our area of the world, in the Fertile Crescent, about 10,000 years ago. That's when agriculture started. And this is based on both the genetic record and the archaeological record. And people selected for mutations which made the crops that we know today. So in nature, the wild wheat is just disseminating its seeds. It doesn't have a nice spike that you can harvest. If you have a nice spike, you cannot reproduce, right? You need to plant yourself for the next generation. So these are the first mutations that were selected by humans. And what we are doing today is really a continuation of this farming revolution that started. And now, when we look at the wheat in nature, we can see that they are very resilient to disease, resilient to drought, resilient to climate, because they've seen it all. They were under glaciation period, they were under warming period, and so on. So we are learning, now that we have the genomes, the whole genome of this plant, to find the genes which are important to bring resilience to the new climate change. And we are using technology that we have developed to transfer this trait to the modern crops. So that's one way to adapt. Another way to adapt, which is completely different, which I'm also working on, and there was interest of that in Vancouver because of a company, Cubic Farm, that works there, is what's called vertical farming. So today you could grow plant in a completely controlled environment. Let's say take this room and start to make shelves and use the whole volume, and you can make many stairs, like a whole building, or we've seen in Montreal abandoned silos which are converted for vertical farming. And so you control completely the environment. So it doesn't matter if you're in Canada in winter or in Saudi in the summer. You can grow your vegetable and have them, and they're close to where they are consumed in the urban environment. So you save a lot on the carbon footprint. I mean, tomatoes, you say tomatoes in Canada. Yeah. Tomatoes are coming from, Florida, California, Mexico. So they traveled a long way to reach to your plate, okay? So that's a huge carbon footprint. So if you could grow them here, that would be a great advantage. So today, vertical farming is done mostly for greeneries, for lettuce and greens and basils and things like that, which grow fast and don't take much space. What we've done, we've miniaturized tomatoes to become like a small bonsai. That's a whole plant, and they can grow in shelves. And we arrange it to have a very rapid life cycle. So we can make many generations in 1 year to make it profitable. And the next frontier now is to get them to grow under low light, because energy costs a lot. I mean, it's expensive to grow, so that's why it's not been done so far, because it's quite expensive. So now there is a LED revolution, so it's something which is more feasible. But eventually you save on water, you save on fertilizer, you save on space, and if you work in a clean way, you also don't need to spray with insecticide and pesticide, and you can have a completely clean produce. So this is one of the things we are doing, new green revolution, trying to adapt crops to vertical farming. So right now it's not only for greeneries, we want to do it now for tomatoes, and the genes we found which make miniature plants can be now mutated in other plants, so we could grow other things like cucumbers or other vegetable in this vertical environment.
Okay, well, thank you. So there's a lot to unpack there. So we have to extend the session now till the end of the day. So we have the plants, and now we have the beef. And we're really pleased today that Cherie Copithorne-Barnes, who is the CEO of CL Ranches, and the founding chair of the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. Now, I was through my career doing sustainable energy, and it was the roundtables that kicked that off, and I'll be interested when your roundtable kicked off. There's the Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and as you listen to the panel today, as you listen to Avi and Cherie, what you're going to see is the intersections between energy and agriculture are very deep. So sustainability requires a very holistic set of thoughts and systems and approaches to the systems, because effectively we're trying to reduce the footprint of what's going to be 9 or 10 billion people. And we're trying to nourish them and make them healthy, because that's really what we're here for. Cherie has, her top 3 accomplishments really were getting that roundtable off the ground, and I think there's both global and national roundtables, which she's going to talk about. But what they did is they created the true life cycle of beef. There's a lot of controversy around, now beef is bad, because the way that we like to address sustainability is do good and bad. Wind is bad. Wind is good. Coal is bad. Natural gas is bad. Beef is bad. Plants are good. Humans want to think in these very simplistic terms. And the reality is the earth doesn't work that way. It's not simplistic. And so what they did is they've done a life cycle now of the beef, of cradle to grave for producing and consuming beef. And then they now have set up a way for them to create standards against that life cycle and look to increase the sustainability. So really pleased to have you here and tell us more about that. Cherie.
Well, thank you, and I too appreciate having the opportunity to come. I'm excited to learn more about the Weizmann Institute, because honestly, and I hate to say this, but it was really the first that I'd heard of it, and it's exciting to see the work that's being done here. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a 4th-generation rancher of 135 years. When he holds up a piece of wheat that says, this is 3,000 years old. So it gives you a bit of perspective of, we need to be working and talking globally and collectively. And really, my journey in sustainability really stems about that idea of bringing people together, because my entire adult life really has been spent defending what I do as a rancher. Our family has been sued by our next door neighbors to the south for cutting down trees when they had no idea. And the reality is all we were trying to do is maintain a brush encroachment that has been ongoing and is ongoing to this very day. We lose 15% of our grazing lands every single year to brush encroachment. But if you're a new resident that's just paid a pretty good price for the property you've just come onto, and you see someone cutting down trees or knocking back bush, you have no idea what the history or what the reason of that is. And so their mechanism to defense is to do, in that particular case, it was to throw a lawsuit out. But they didn't know that they had options. They didn't know that they could come talk to us. Another example is we have the Trans-Canada Highway going right through our place. And our calving fields are right along there because my great-grandfather built the homestead right where they decided to put the highway. So we have all our calving fields right there at the highway. Well, one day my husband and I are helping a poor heifer who prolapsed, and I won't go into detail what that means, but it's not a pretty picture. The RCMP rolled into our field because there were numerous calls that we were abusing this poor animal, when in reality we were trying to save her life. And these continuous incidents started happening over and over again, and at the same time, globally we were hearing beef is bad, we need to do something about this. And it got me thinking in that most situations are a direct result because we have become removed from food production as the common person. And so there's a lack of understanding of how to communicate what we do, and that disconnect, because sometimes it's pretty harsh to understand what we do at the same time. So as an industry, we were trying to get ahead of a lot of this negative thinking, but we could never quite get there because there's 69,000 producers here in Canada. We're 2% of the population. We just don't have a large enough reach. Now, fortunately, at the same time, we knew this was a global situation. And one of our biggest customers, being McDonald's, was also facing the same criticism for serving beef. But so they had the foresight to actually start to come to the producer groups, both here in Canada and in the United States. And fortunately, because we are such a small community here, we were able to actually enact or come together a little bit quicker because you're not dealing with quite so many entities, so many frictions, so much politics because of that. And we really started talking, and one of the best things that we ever did is McDonald's decided they needed their staunchest critics in the room at the same time because they realized if we didn't get ahead of this, we were in big trouble. So we had some of the most interesting characters come forward. World Wildlife Fund, for us as ranchers, we thought that here were these animal activists that were going to come onto our ranches, and we really weren't sure what it was that we were going to get into. And the very first meeting we had, we actually, one of the first real collaborative meetings we had was out at my ranch. And I'll never forget, it was the 14th of May in 2014, so this is really how far back we're going. It's not that long ago. But we just had 3 feet of snow that night. And again, our community hall sits right in the middle of my cabin field. And I couldn't have planned it any better. Because you could see the cows and calves literally in their little wells because it was nice and warm the next day and the snow was gone, obviously, because that happens here all the time. But it was an absolutely perfect way to be able to start a dialect saying, you have to be careful when you talk about trying to, whether it's regulate or start insisting that policies be put in place when it comes to the idea of sustainability, because we are so out of control in our environment of what we can manage and what we can do that we got to make sure that there's no unintended consequences. And so as dialogue started to happen, we started to learn that our animal activist groups or our animal protection groups or our grassland protection groups, we started hearing what they were saying rather than being in a confrontational perspective. Really, as we decided, what we decided to do was, first off, what is the definition of sustainability? What is a sustainable beef product? And fortunately, that was done at a global level, because we knew that no matter where you come from in the world, we all have to be talking the same language. And so we hit an agreement on what that was going to be. Very simplistic. I mean, it is a product that is environmentally sound, socially responsible, and economically viable. Same definition pretty much as everybody else. But we also added prioritizes people, planet, animals, and so we started adding a few little details. We knew that if we became too prescriptive, it wasn't going to work, because think about country to country how beef is produced, how any agricultural product is produced, and it's going to vary. I farm, the elevation of my farm is at about 4,700 feet. It goes from 5,100 feet right down to 3,600 feet. I can tell you what happens at 3,600 is not what happens at 5. So even on my own property, let alone community to community or province to province or country to country, you cannot become prescriptive, because we have to think of what outcomes, what overarching outcomes are going to be needed to be able to help define this product. The most important part of all that was that we did have some of our staunchest critics in the room, because we needed to also be addressing what were the hot points, where were our gaps in really understanding what it is that we needed to do to prove we knew what we were doing wasn't terrible, or I wouldn't have a 135-year operation. So we had to make sure that we were able to answer those types of criticisms and create something that was going to be tangible enough that we could go in front of our policymakers, go in front of our consumers, and also go in front of our producers, because many producers, we're a little bit of an independent kind of group, and we had to be able to make sure that they were ready to be a part of this as well. And then finally, the final result of bringing everybody together like that was that finally now we're all talking the same language. So it didn't matter if you were McDonald's, if you were Pfizer, if you were the animal activist group, or you were a beef producer. When we talked beef sustainability and all the principles that are within it, we're all talking the same language, the same definitions, the same understanding. So there wasn't this misinterpretation of what it was. And so that's made a big difference, because when you get 3-second sound bites, if you're not talking the same language, you get hit pretty fast.
Wow. I think one of the things that my research shows me about food is that when you think about humans, and Avi, you probably know more about what the Krebs cycle really is inside a human than anybody does, but from what I understand, as humans ingest food, they use carbohydrates and fat and emit CO2 for energy, but protein doesn't really go through you. Protein is chopped up into little amino acids, and it goes and it rebuilds your muscles and your heart and your liver. And in a lot of ways, a lot of what goes on in terms of feeding the human herd and having the human herd live among the other herd on the earth, which is animals and plants, a lot of it has been around getting good sources of getting protein into the system. Because without protein, we don't have muscle, we're not strong, we're not viable, we start to weaken. As women, older women, we get osteoporosis, we get bent over, and it's a lot about protein deficiency. What I also understand is they now know that the body can't tell the difference between protein from plants or animals. So the big story about that is not an accurate story. Because when I grew up, it was, oh, if you're a vegetarian, you're going to die any minute now. You're going to die, you know? And that isn't true. But at the same time, getting good sources of plant protein for feed, plant protein for people, animal protein made sustainably is part of this whole big equation. So can you tell us, when you sit back and you think about the intersection between the protein from plants, the protein from animals, and sustainability and science, how should we be thinking about that even more so that as Cherie goes forward into this journey that she's got on sustainable beef, there's just an even greater education and a way to extinguish the either or, because sustainability is really about creativity on both ends.
Okay, so protein, of course, are essential for our body. Protein for meat is well adapted in a way in its composition to all the amino acids that we need for us. So if you have a plant protein, you have to balance it between legumes and cereals to have the right composition. But this is feasible. There are scientific solutions and ideas which are beyond meat. It's no advertisement, which are beyond growing cattle. So one is to have a plant source from protein. Now, sorry that I'm going back to wheat, but that's my obsession.
That's good for Alberta. We're wheat, beef, and oil here.
So one of the wild wheats have 20% protein in their grain. And during my PhD, I mapped some of these genes. And one gene in particular has been transferred to the Canadian wheat, which is much richer in protein than in the rest of the world.
Right.
Why? Because in Canada, you have only 4 months to grow wheat, between May and end of August. So it doesn't accumulate so much starch. And also, the Canadian may say, okay, if we have low yield because the season is so short, we have to get more protein. And the genes from this wild plant that I collected in nature when I was a student is now in the breeding program and is in the Canadian wheat. So that's why we need this biodiversity, we need conservation and protection of these plants in nature and transfer of this gene of protein. So that's one way. So you can have protein from plants and you can use genetics to improve the content of protein in the plants, if it's legumes or if it's cereals. The other approach is to say there is a new field which is called cultured meat, so trying to have a steak without a cow. I'm curious what you think about it, and I'm sure you'll react to that.
I'm not there yet. Sure, you're safe with me. My freezer's full of beef.
So I want to give you an example of research which was done at the Weizmann Institute in this respect. It's very fascinating. It also shows how research works in this respect. And so one of our scientists was studying the heart, development of the heart, from embryo to adult. And he was interested by the fact that the embryo and the young heart can regenerate if the heart is damaged. So if you take a mice, you damage the heart, and you see the heart regenerates fine. If you take the adult, it doesn't, like with us. And he found a factor which is responsible for regeneration, and it was a big success, and he started a company on that, and so on. And then he spoke with another scientist on campus who work on cell fusion. So cell fusion is an interesting and important biological process because in muscles you have this long, you have cell fusion also when a virus fuses with the cell, like we all know now with the corona. We have fusion between the sperm and the egg during fertilization. And you have fusion in muscle cells to make very long cells. So you have 2 cells, they fuse, they make one long, they fuse, and then you have these long fibers. And Ori was working on the fusion, and he was working on the regeneration, and they decided to add to their cell culture, both regeneration and fusion factors, and then they got this incredibly long filament growing into the Petri dish, and that you can grow in the incubator, and that's another company which is trying to do now cultured meat. So it's a nice example of collaboration between people and how you can use science to make new things. So, I mean, it doesn't mean, of course, that the real thing is obsolete. I mean, sure I never tasted this fake meat or whatever, cultured meat. But these are the two main trends to provide the protein, to use the one, let's say, from beef or the one from plants.
So Cherie, when you think about your beefing in your 135 years, you know, in the energy industry, we went from sort of hydro to coal to natural gas, wind, solar, batteries. We're on our way to hydrogen. There's been a long evolution. It turns out, you know, to keep people warm and to have them be warm, cold, cook, and travel, you actually need all of the above. But as you think about your ranch, do you ever see yourself evolving into cultured meats, taking another approach? I mean, here in Alberta, the oil sands is a way to manufacture oil. It isn't, you know, we know where the oil is. It's in the sand. We manufacture oil out of the oil. We put the sand back. We no longer look under the earth to find it. We actually manufacture it. So how do you think about that?
I guess I'm going to respond in a way that's maybe not answering direct how you've just asked that question.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your statement about food security. And all of us are very conscious about the fact, one of the collaborative groups that we brought into the dialogues of beef are in fact nutritionists. And so we recognize full well that there is a serious global issue there. And no matter how much I ramp up my production or how efficient we can actually get a beef animal or any meat animal, we're never going to have, I would argue we have a distribution issue as much as we have a food issue. And that's where I welcome the idea of culture. If we can get these types of products to areas that it's too expensive to get red meat or any kind of alternative protein to them, it makes sense to be doing this from a survival perspective as much as anything. The best part about this is that I don't think you're going to be able to culture meat out at my place. The good thing is that only cows are able to, sheep and goats wouldn't ever cut it out because I got too many grizzly bears and cougars. A cow can defend herself. She can take what you see in the foothills of the Rockies and convert it into this nutrient-dense protein. Nothing else can do that except maybe bison, but I think we're a little late on that concept. So it's at a point where I welcome the addition. I'm a firm believer in competition. I love the fact that we've got these alternative protein plants popping up all around southern Alberta because southern Alberta is also a great place to grow lentils and peas. We need these products in the system to help curb this issue. And beef is just a complement to all of them. There is room for everybody in this.
People who consume beef and meat often worry about the antibiotics that are in the production. And you talked about the unintended consequences. And often when we think about manufacturing food, there are unintended consequences with farm fish. There's unintended consequences with beef that can only really take care of themselves if they're given a lot of antibiotics. That doesn't feel sustainable to me. I was wondering, Avi, is there a way in the plant world to create the genome of the kind of, so to make the best beef? It's great grasses and hay. Can we make our hay better so that our beef is stronger? Yeah. Can we find ways to not have to have our beef require antibiotics and all sorts of medicines in order to get to the market? And I'm going to ask you the same question because I think that's one of the most important parts of sustainability is not having these unintended consequences of ingesting other things when you eat your food.
So yeah, that's a great question. So it is one of the difficulty. Why do cows create methane? Because they have to digest the grass, and this is difficult. I mean, we cannot do that, but you know they have multiple stomachs, and they have bacteria which can work in an anaerobic manner in their guts. So they have a very unique microbiome. And this is this anaerobic bacteria which make the methane. Now, there are many ideas around how to play with the microbiome of the cows and to make it easier for them or to reduce the production of methane from eating the grass. So that's one thing. The other thing is to make plants which are easier to digest. So what is difficult to digest, it's very hard to break down the cell wall of the plant. Why? Or wood is even a cell wall. If it was easy, there would be no trees and no plants. Everything would break it down. So these fibers are polymers of cellulose, which are polymers of sugars, hemicellulose, other types of sugars, and lignin. And lignin is the tough guy here. So there is also a possibility to reduce the amount of lignin without affecting, you can tweak this. People have been interested in that when they were interested in biofuel.
Yeah.
How can you digest by enzymes, designing enzymes? And we have great scientists, some of them supported by the Canadian, who are designing protein, and they are designing this protein to be more efficient to pre-digest the plant material. So, and many people, that's also something very interesting. I'm diverting just a little bit, but many people have redirected their research to address sustainability. So Sarel Fleischmann, he was working mostly on how to design protein which can make vaccines or which can make all kind of industrial processes, and now he's looking also into sustainability. How can we have a better production of biomass? So you could have bacteria which make these enzymes which should help the animal digest the straw and the hay in a more efficient way and then have less emission. So that's where science really can come into the picture. And
So firstly, I know enough about the science and what's going on in the beef industry to be really dangerous. Okay. And I'm going to point out, there's a gentleman over there in the yellow shirt. His name is Dr. Reynold Bergen. He is the science director for the beef cattle research. So you want technical stuff? Go talk to him. But there's a lot of work being done in our industry. And I'll use actually the poultry industry first, because they're using things like thyme, like the spice thyme in their feed to help reduce the use and need for antibiotics. There's a lot of work being done in the livestock industry with regards to red algae and different components to help reduce the methane. So the science is trying to make up for a lot of the concerns, and not make up. I mean, we're finding really neat new alternatives to being forced into using antibiotics all the time. But the other thing I want to make sure it's widely understood is that we do use antibiotics, but there are withdrawal times. And part of our sustainability model and the outcome focus on this is teaching producers that you must respect those. And so our Canadian system, our North American system has become quite adamant, and our plants are being tested. Tissue samples are being tested to ensure that there is complete withdrawal of these. And again, that's a communications issue that has been overblown, because the reality is that the 99% of producers are in fact following those withdrawals.
I was telling Avi before we started this, one of the carbon offset projects I worked on in 1990 was we supported an NGO in India from Transalta here in Calgary who helped women in India purchase urea blocks for their cattle so that they would lick them and reduce methane and make more milk production, because the way that you made women better off in India is they sell milk for their families, and they were increasing their milk production by 30 to 50%, which was a huge uptick in the income of the women. And the carbon offset was 50 cents a ton. Now it's going to cost us in Alberta $300 a ton to capture carbon and put it back under the earth. And that 50 cents a ton not only reduced carbon on the planet, but it had a huge impact on the lifestyles of those women. So, this goes back to being thoughtful about sustainability and what it means, and how to incent this kind of creativity is better than saying, this is bad, that's good. This is bad, that's good. And I think this is what we're hearing from our panelists. So we're at the magic mark of 8:45. There's mics right here. If you have a question, right here. And if you could just give us your name, and that would be very helpful.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Swift. My background is finance in the oil and gas business. I have a curious question. I apologize if it's off topic a little bit, but is COVID the result of a mutation gone bad? Is that possible? Would you be able to respond to that?
Well, a little bit. There are, we are all the time exposed to viruses of animals which are near us. Some are very specific to their host, and some have a broad host range, so they can infect different kind of species. And in the case of COVID, it's still debated whether these variants which jump to human came, from some wildlife or happened in some labs. But yeah, I mean, it's likely that this is some new variants. But new variants are made all the time, so, as we know with COVID. So yeah, evolution works, and in viruses it works fast because in one little drop of blood, you can have billions of viruses. So even when DNA or RNA replication is precise, it's not precise enough. When you have billions, you'll have errors and you have variants. So viruses are very tight. And so yeah, this mutation can occur. And that's something that we live with. You want to say on the animals?
I mean, in the animal world, we are always constantly, some of the variants of coronavirus are present every day in livestock, and we're vaccinating annually because they do change, they mutate, and they're also unstoppable. We haven't found, and I think that's a gap in science right now, we haven't been able to stop this, as we're all aware of. So they're constantly evolving, and we just have to be able to manage for what the best practice for in the animal world is making sure that they're as healthy as they can possibly be.
Over there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Netting with Nutrien. I have a question for Avi about nutritional density in food, and I'm wondering how much of a plant's nutritional density is derived from the genetics, and how much is environment and management practices, and what's the next big revolution for wheat?
All right. Oh, that's a tough one. Both. The answer is always nature and nurture. So both strong genetic component, but also very much affected by environment, especially nitrogen fertilizer will increase the amount of protein in the wheat grain, so that's for sure. But you have many other compounds in the wheat. You have all kind of carotenoids and the next frontier, I think, is the next challenge we have is in making plant wheat resilient. In many places in the world, they cannot grow wheat anymore. There is desertification, and people migrate. Human migration to Europe from North Africa or Africa, very much related to drought that is going on in this region. So resilience is one major focus. There is a big revolution going on because of all the knowledge we have on genomics. I think people are giving now the nutrient compound, the composition. So the composition of wheat is very much, people look at content in iron, magnesium, and minerals. And this is also something related to nutrition, but also to genetics. So these are things people look at a bit less, I would say. Now the big focus is on keeping the yield, because what you said in the beginning, that it's not clear if we have enough food, we just don't distribute it, or we don't have enough. What you say is true, but for maybe 10, 20 years ago, now, especially now with the war in Ukraine and Russia, we don't have enough wheat to feed the planet. There are more people, and there are many droughts and extreme events, so it's becoming, again, an issue. And, I mean, there are some amazing accomplishments of humanities. We don't see starvation anymore, what we saw when we were kids. We don't see people dying of hunger. This is something which has been almost abolished. But malnutrition, if it's in the developing country or developed country, is a huge issue. And zinc, for example, and vitamin A were considered some of the main criteria to be increased. So wheat is quite rich in vitamin A, and zinc can be increased. In rice, there is a big deficiency of vitamin A, and and people want to engineer the rice, so the famous golden rice, to be able to produce it. And there has been so far a very strong opposition of the public, which is a pity because it affects hundreds of thousands of children, which become blind because of deficiency in vitamin A. So there is lots to do in both fields, and something we cannot do because of regulations, and something we can do, but both nutrition, I mean, what you put in the soil and the genetics are critical.
We have a question there?
And can I just say wish list on that list?
Yeah,
Is that, as someone who's a 90-day frost-free, make it grow faster, and I'll grow more wheat. So.
Okay.
Sorry, Don, there was a question here first.
Oh, right there, and then over here.
Yeah, fascinating discussion. I have a question. It's, I'd say, a bit peripheral but related. Avi, I believe there's a lot of work that's being done at Weizmann and in Israel generally on irrigation. You know, as I understand it, you have robust crops in the desert, so there's something that's happening here in terms of water and irrigation. And I'm just curious if you could expand a bit on how what's being done at Weizmann in that area of, you know, water management, irrigation, how that relates to what you're thinking about in terms of plants and perhaps your co-panelist on sustainable beef. And is there some relationship here that's relevant to know about?
Okay, so there is lots of research in Israel on water management. If it's irrigation, I mean, that's not been done in Weizmann, but the drip irrigation was developed in Israel, so to reduce evaporation and loss of water. There is a huge amount of treatment of water, and for this we have many people involved, including in Weizmann. You saw a picture of this young guy who looked at the microbiome of the water, and he's interested into bacteria which can break down plastic, which can break down pollutant, and so on. 90% of the sewage in Israel is recycled and is going to agriculture. So 90%, which it's huge. It's not, there is nothing close by in any country. And we have, most of the water we drink now is from desalination. So this is also addressing, mitigating, not finding solution for, but finding way to survive the problem of irrigation. So most of the agriculture has dropped some crops which are very water intensive, like cotton, and so it's been reduced in our area, but it's kept for all the other vegetables and things like that. And I think if you use water in irrigation very precisely, you know, you can also grow in very arid places. So, for example, in an experiment that we had last year, there were barely 200 millimeters of rain in the Negev, in the south of Israel, and there was a gap between the early rains and late rains, and the plant would die. So we had only 40 millimeters, which is nothing, and it saved the plant. So doing this precise farming, looking at the weather forecast, looking at when to irrigate, how to manage the resources in the most efficient way, you know, looking at the clouds, at the weather, the satellites, use satellites now. So it's becoming very high tech.
We have time for one more question.
For the cattle, I don't know. Maybe
here and there. Two more questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bill Lister from Calgary. I'm aware Weizmann has developed a lot of drugs in partnerships with companies. Are you doing any partnerships in your agricultural research? Say Nutrien is here, Canadian, big international company. Can they come to Weizmann and stake a project and there can be profits for Weizmann and Nutrien, something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always looking forward for opportunities to collaborate with industry. There are lots of technology transfer in Israel. So, you know, it's one of the fascinating things about the Institute. Our mission is to do basic research, not to do applied research. That's our main mission. But in a paradoxical manner, we have more patents than any other institute worldwide. So doing research which can be disruptive bring really to the new discovery, which is not driven by a specific goal. So we have this academic freedom to do whatever we want, but there are many people, we have this entrepreneur spirit and are making startup companies. All the IP of their invention is protected to make startups. And I think we must have in the green tech and agro about more than 10 different companies. My student, I myself started 2 companies. One of them made it to NASDAQ and became quite significant, and the other is just a small one, together with Farrell. And Weizmann is, of course, involved in that. So in the last 8 years, we had 100 startups coming out from Weizmann directly, and 150 from alumni indirectly from Weizmann. So this is huge because we're only 9 million people. So this is huge, and specifically for plant nutrients, I'd be very interested myself for all the field of vertical farming and in general also for agriculture. There is interest in that.
And you bring up a very good point because, I've done a lot of funding for, I was the Programs and Services Chair for the Alberta Livestock and Meat Agency, for example. And one thing that becomes very obvious to us here in Canada especially is that our greatest weakness right now is the ability to do that knowledge transfer, that technology transfer to industry. Because so much of it's being done in our big institutions, and there's such a bog down to get the information out of the institutions into the hands of the private sector. That's where there's promise with dealing direct with institutes.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Cohen. My question is for Cherie. You were talking about the challenge of feeding the world population, and one of the things that's emerged is factory farming, which doesn't really affect meat cattle. In my mind, factory farming equates to animal abuse. Do you think there's another way of raising food for people?
That's a perfect example of people will call what I do factory farming. Because first and foremost, I work for a corporation. It happens to be a family-run corporation, but it's a corporation. Factory farming has got some bad connotations, but the reality is it depends how you define it. The more intensified production we can do, the smaller the footprint. And so there's a lot of advantages to intensification of agriculture, whether it be livestock or farming. So it kind of depends on your definition and what your outcome is that you're trying to produce. There's always going to be the want and desire to deal directly with the farmer and have the farmer market, but honestly, that's not going to feed the world. So it's just a matter of, do we want to feed 9 billion, 90 billion, 50 billion people, or do we want to feed our just local community? And that's really where the definition you have to figure out what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Again, with some, as we look at our feedlot industry, for example, the science is getting better. Our understanding of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable is very clear now. And there's no reason for a lot of the negative. We've made mistakes in the past. And we've learned from those mistakes. And not only have we learned, but we now know how to even improve upon it that much quicker. So this has been a part of the journey of sustainability as well.
Okay. I promised to get you out of here at 9 o'clock. I just want to end with one comment. When I reflect back on the sustainability statement that a group of Albertans put together, I think it was in 1987, we had 7 or 8 imperatives, and one of them was a sense of place. And Avi, on one of our calls, I think, we talked about factory farming. And I think it was you who said, imagine you go to the supermarket and you don't go get a package off the supermarket and open up your frozen peas. You go into the aisle where the peas are being grown, and you go into the aisle where the lettuce is being grown, and you go into the aisle where the tomatoes are being grown. I did say to Avi, so far, all of this factory making of vegetables does not make the same carrot, potato, or tomato that my mother does on her ranch. So there's still a long ways to go so we can actually enjoy that. But he tells me that actually what I'm eating in the supermarket doesn't taste the same because the nutrients are being lifted out of it because of the transportation and the storage and food sitting around the world. So we're talking about a food crisis, and yet the food we're eating is probably a year old. So I think when we pull all this together, what I reflect on listening to the two of you is in the future, we might be able to relocalize our food production because we can use the various places in the planet to make the foods we need and want, because we can intersect farmers and scientists to figure out how to use our land, how to use our days of growing, how to use our amount of sunshine, how to use our amount of water. If it's a little bit of water in the desert in Israel, if it's a lot of water in Vancouver, we can actually come to a place where we can make our food more sustainably. And I think with that, we would have much greater food security and food nutrition. So I hope you all enjoyed our panel as much as I did. I'm a podcast maniac, and I think we should have a podcast with these guys on food, because it was very, very interesting, and I'm really grateful for the kind of work that you're doing on behalf of all of us, and really grateful that you came today. So let's give them a hand.
So I don't know about you, but I'm not ready for this discussion to be over yet. Thank you, Cherie, Avi, and Don, for introducing us and guiding us through a very thought-provoking, informative, and important conversation. So thank you for that, and I'm sure that all of us will leave here today with at least one takeaway from this discussion. And for me, that takeaway, similar to what Don was just saying, is the importance of collaboration, and that, science and research is very important, but I think that that communication between industry and science is crucial to move us forward to where we need to get to in the next 10 years. So I want to thank all of you for making the choice to be with us today and taking the time to be with us today. I invite you to learn more about Weizmann's Institute for Environmental Sustainability. Typically, we would have produced flashy brochures for you to leave with and have all the information, but seeing as though this is a sustainability event, I'm going to encourage you to visit our website, Weizmann Canada. We also will send out a link in the next few days to each of you where you can explore more about the video that you saw at the beginning. There are 7 centers within our institute, and they're all unbelievably fascinating. We touched on just one area today. So I'd also like to recognize our valued volunteer leadership that's here with us today, including members of our Weizmann Canada National Board, so Stan Magidson, Martin Molyneux, our Calgary chapter, Darlene Switzer-Foster, Eddie Lang, and Josh Switzer, and our Weizmann League, Jordan Boyd and Jordan Magidson. If you can all just wave hello to everybody. I'd also like to recognize my Weizmann Canada colleagues, so Beth Freeman and Anna Katsouforis, and we all of us from leadership and Weizmann are very passionate about what we do and always happy to have a conversation. So if you want to stick around afterwards, we'll be here to continue the conversation. So finally, thank you to the team here at the Wilder Institute Calgary Zoo for their warm hospitality this morning. This venue choice was very intentional because of its efforts in environmental sustainability. So I thank you all for being here, and hope to speak to you all soon. Thank you.